Hello everyone, welcome back to another PM Problems YouTube video. If you love talking about project management, construction management, and general workplace topics, be sure to check out our blog at solvepmproblems.com. Also, please hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get updates on future videos. This video will be focused on a financial practice in project management known as a cost to complete. A cost to complete is also referred to as an estimate to complete, estimate at completion, or budget at completion. We'll start by defining the basics of what a cost to complete entails, and then we'll perform an example cost to complete using our free automated cost to complete template calculator, which you can download by clicking the link in the description below. So what is a cost to complete? A cost to complete is well defined in its name: the expected costs needed to complete a project. Putting together a cost to complete involved estimating all of the remaining costs required to finish a project with as much detail and accuracy as possible. This practice is often used in construction, but the practice can be used on any project to estimate remaining costs needed to finish, along with anticipated revenue and ultimately total project profitability. That's what a cost to complete is in a nutshell. In terms of actually calculating this information, there are several ways to go about doing this. Generally speaking, it's best to have an updated completion schedule and to break down all costs by categories, as they're easier to manage in pieces. In this video, we'll be using our own cost to complete calculator to demonstrate how to put together this estimate. Be sure to download your own at the link in the video description below. It is completely free. In this example, we're going to calculate remaining costs, remaining revenue, how profitable the remaining work will be, and the overall project profitability. Before getting started, have the following information on hand for your project: the project start and end date, the original contract value, the value of executed and approved change orders, and the total cost presently on the books along with the latest date they cover. If this seems complicated, our cost to complete template includes a list of detailed instructions and guidance. Also, our template is designed to calculate as much as possible automatically. Now I'll see you inside the cost to complete template where I'll do a live demonstration. Alright, so welcome inside our cost to complete calculator, where we're going to be doing an example cost to complete for a hypothetical project. This is the project summary sheet that essentially just obviously summarizes all of the basic information for the cost to complete. Once we actually enter information for expected costs, as well as revenue that's already come in and revenue that's going to be coming in. As you can see here, you enter basic information such as the original contract value, any approved and executed change orders, the cost to date, and the revenue received to date, and then the rest of it begins to get automatically calculated as we project out what we expect labor expenses to be, equipment expenses to be, materials, subcontractors, other expenses, and so on. So most of this is actually automated, even though it looks like a lot of information. But on the instructions tab here, you can actually follow a step-by-step guide on how to fill this out and how to complete it in which order, along with what some of the variables and metrics mean on the project snapshot we were just looking at. Again, most of the information is automated. Everything that's shown here in green on the right-hand side is calculated automatically once you enter information. We're just responsible for entering what's shown in yellow here, which again is broken down into categories such as hourly cost of labor and equipment rentals and so on. And the reason we do that is to make the cost to complete process a little bit more simple. It's a big nut to crack when you have an entire project to estimate, but when you break it into categories, it becomes a lot more reasonable to come up with a final cost figure for what you think your project is going to take to actually be finished. So let's flip over to the summary tab again, and we'll start filling out some basic project information and actually start entering costs to show how this spreadsheet works, as well as how a cost to complete works in general. So let's enter some information like project name. That's going to be project ABC. Project number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm running a little low on creativity today, hence the very, very basic information here. So why don't we make this one a little more fun? Top secret agency. And the start date, let's say, is January 1st, and the end date will be New Year's Eve. Today's date is July 6th. And the costs on the books are going to be through June 30th. The reason we make that distinction here is because the cost on the books is usually trailing or lagging behind what's actually happening on a project. In construction, it's typical for accounting and cost reports to be updated monthly, and if you do a projection like a cost to complete in the middle of the month, it's going to be there's going to be a lag there between what the costs on the books show versus the costs that you're actually going to be estimating based on today's date. So it's just important to capture that period there so as to not leave out costs from a couple of weeks between when the reports last show costs and where we're actually at on the project. As you can see down here, we have some calculations for remaining work days, remaining work weeks, and remaining work days after the close of costs, which we covered a bit before. There's a distinction there, and the remaining weeks after close of costs. One important thing to point out here is that the dates exclude holidays, and how you can actually enter your own holidays if you're at an organization that has specific days off or where you know no work will be happening and you don't want to include that in the cost projection. You can actually add your own holidays here. This is a typical list of all the federal holidays that are already accounted for in the spreadsheet here. And you can add your own as well. You can add as many as you want, and they'll automatically be accounted for in the summary sheet that we were just looking at. So back to the summary, we're going to start entering some actual financial information here. So the original contract value, let's say, was $1 million, and an additional $175,000 in change orders. That's approved change orders that have actually been executed and are in hand and now part of the contract. So we then get this adjusted contract value by adding those two together of just over $1 million, $1.175 million. As far as the cost on the books go, through June 30th, the costs are $410,000. So right away, you'll probably see that this lights up red. We haven't entered any revenue yet to offset those costs. So it looks like we've just lost $410,000 with no revenue to date, which obviously is not true at all and would be very, very bad if that was the case. So that said, let's go over to the revenue ledger here, where we're going to enter some payment information for payments we've received to date. So as you can see, this automatically populates on the left-hand side in that snapshot based on whatever we enter, both on the summary sheet and as we enter additional financial information here. So this tab is basically for any revenue that's been collected and the date it was collected. So let's say that, this would never happen in a real construction project, but let's say that every month for the work happening, there's a deposit 1 week after the end of the month. So let's start entering some actual revenue here based on payment dates and the month that we're being paid for to date on the project already. So let's say here February 7th is going to be January's payment. Let's say January requisition payment. And let's say that every month we get a payment, so that makes the end of February, end of March, end of April, end of May, and the end of June. Obviously, we could fill out the rest of this information here, but I won't do that just to not take up too much time in the video. Now let's come up with some revenue amounts for each of these checks. Let's say this one's $80,000. Say that's $120,000. Say this one is $100,000. This one is, let's say, $75,000. This one is $100,000. And let's say this one is $25,000. So again, those are just the different requisitions from each month that the project's been going so far and the amount of payment we've received for each. And if you have a check number or some sort of reference, you can type that in here as well. So down at the bottom of the sheet, you see that we've calculated at the bottom of the sheet, you see that we've collected $500,000 so far in revenue for this project. And that actually is shown over here on the left in the snapshot automatically. When you look at revenue received to date, item E, you'll see that $500,000 is now shown, and that shows a profit to date of $90,000 and a profit margin to date of 18%. Alright, so let's move on to the next tab here, which is pending change orders. This is a tab we're going to outline all of the change orders that are upcoming, along with the revenue we're expecting to collect against those change orders. So we'll enter an example here just to have something calculated into the total. We're going to do change order number 5, given that there's already been a few change orders as per line B in the snapshot there. So as you can see, line I, pending change orders, updates to reflect the total of what's shown on this tab here. And that's going to continue to calculate as we update more information. So we'll move on to the next tab here, which is hourly labor. We're going to estimate the remaining labor costs that are needed to complete the project here. So let's make it a little bit vague just to illustrate the point. We'll say there's, let's say, 200 man days left worth of labor costs to complete the job, and at a rate of $500 per man day. There we go. So the snapshot will continue to update as we enter more information going forward. Line K, estimated cost to complete, now reflects the labor shown here and will also reflect the total of the next tabs. We'll enter some equipment costs that we're expecting. Let's go with a crane, which is Mike's Crane, we'll say, is the vendor, along with how many months that's going to be needed and the rental rate per month. So we'll enter $7,500. And just for good measure, let's add an excavator as well. So essentially, we're just plotting out and projecting exactly what we expect by category for each piece of equipment and for each type of cost in an effort to get a total cost to complete the job. There we go, $4,000 a month for an excavator, and let's say there's a couple of generators there too, 2 of them. Those are rentals as well. Equipment or us, let's say, is the vendor. And those will be for 5 months apiece times 2 at $1,000 per month. So now we have an estimated equipment and rental cost to be projected, to be accounted for rather, into the total here. Moving on to the material tab, we'll come up with an estimate for the materials required. These are top secret, as we said already. And let's say that we're buying them from Materials Galore, why not? And just for the example here, we'll just enter one lump sum to get an idea of the big picture material costs going forward. Let's say it's roughly $80,000. But you can make this breakdown as detailed as you want. As you can see, you can use units such as bag or square feet or cubic yard, etc., to break down equipment material cost into as many pieces as you need to get an accurate cost to complete. So moving on to the subcontractors tab. Let's say we have one subcontractor working on site, Ace Contracting, or Ace Construction, let's say. Top secret concrete work for their scope of work. And given that this project is about halfway through already, let's say that their total contract value for this sub is $150,000. And given that this project is already halfway through, let's say, we're going to assume we've paid the subcontractor at least $75,000 so far, which gives us a balance of $75,000 remaining for subcontractor costs. You could list several different subcontractors here, all of which will total to the bottom of the sheet, along with any notes or specific comments you have about each sub and what they have left to do to finish. Let's move on to the expense tab here. You can list any expenses you can think of here. It's kind of a miscellaneous catch-all list We'll enter some basics here, such as fuel and computers and phones. Just typical project costs that don't exactly fall into materials or equipment, but are obviously still costing the project just the same. So again, just to illustrate the point, we'll just put one lump sum worth of value in here for what we expect to spend to finish the job. Let's say $25,000. And like all other tabs, that $25,000 gets rolled into the estimated cost to complete line item K in the project snapshot. And last but not least, let's enter some overhead items. This is where you enter management costs or office costs, any other overhead you can think of that affects the bottom line. So we'll enter some information for project management, along with the amount of time we expect the project manager to continue on the job, along with their hourly or weekly rate. Let's bump the quantity up to 25 weeks. And in addition to the project manager, let's say there's assistant project managers on the job as well. We have to account for their costs as well. Let's say there's 2 of them, and each will be present, let's say, for an additional 10 weeks each. There we go, 20 total weeks. There we go, let's say they're $1,500 per week each, including all expenses like tax and insurance, things like that. Let's also enter a site office, a job site trailer. You could put that under the equipment if that seems more applicable to your company and how they manage costs, but let's put it in overhead here. So there's $1,000 a week to rent a site office as well. Now, as you can see, we have $100,000 of total expected overhead to complete the project. And just taking a look over at the left-hand side of the screen in the project snapshot, you see that this information starts populating and gets more realistic. Obviously, a profit of 66% to complete the job is a little unrealistic, though. So let's bump up some of the costs in some of these other tabs just to get it more accurate to what a real project would be like. Let's say there's a bit more labor involved in finishing the job. So let's say we'll add carpenters as well on top of laborers. Let's say they're there for the same exact amount of time, and we'll enter their hourly rate, or daily rate, sorry. And we'll get a higher expected labor cost than what we had previously. So now that we've updated all of the different tabs here, we get to see the project summary in its final glory, basically breaking down all the fundamental big picture financial items such as remaining contract revenue, including through change orders, then the cost to complete based on all the tabs we just filled out, along with the remaining profit, and then the total overall cost for the project, the revenue for the project, and the expected profit when the job is complete. So let's go back to the original summary tab and take a look at the information that's been populated on here since. So taking a look at the labor cost summary, you can see that the percent that the remaining labor cost makes up of all total remaining costs is outlined here and calculated automatically, along with the average cost per day and per week for that item, along with the total cost to complete that we estimated on the individual labor tab. So just a bit more information broken down, of course, based on the dates we've established early on in this process. This tab does the same thing for the equipment and material and subcontractor and expenses, as well as overhead tabs we filled out too. And that just about wraps up the process required to calculate a cost to complete on a project. As far as using our calculator to do a cost to complete on your project, here are a few extra things to know. So first off, all of the data entry tabs are formatted automatically to be in 11 by 17 sizing. So simply select the tabs you want to print, and they should be automatically sized in 11 by 17 format. We've also updated this template to include a fully automated print-friendly summary as well. This tab is a duplicate of the summary tab we've been referencing, but it's in a much cleaner format. Simply add a company logo and you'll be able to print out a clean, simple cost to complete report on your own letterhead. And in closing, we hope you've enjoyed this video and have found it useful. Be sure to download your own free cost to complete calculator from our website by clicking the link below, and make sure you hit those subscribe and notification buttons on the way out. Thanks a lot.